Viña.
We Are Vineyard.
And on the flip side of it, for the professional who's working in the workplace, know that what you have is so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our pastors and leaders, they don't have a business degree. They've been working on crafting a very specific set of skills that is their job. And this brings us back to we are a body. And so do what you do really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are always like, oh, business people can go make money and just tithe more, give more. Do that. Absolutely. Be generous.
I would agree with you should do that.
Do that.
Right.
100%. Do that till it hurts. Do that.
Right. Totally.
And know that the skills and the talents that God has put in you is actually to serve the body too. And it's not just about making money.
Yep.
It's about the creative things that are in you. If you're a communications person, if you're a photographer, if you're, or about the business acumen that God's given you.
Yes.
All of that is actually for the kingdom. It's not just for your company. Yeah, absolutely.
Everything.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, our host, Jay Pathak, is joined by me, Nicole Dill. I'm a member of our national team, serving as our Director of Communications. Let's listen in.
Well, Nicole, thanks for joining us for our podcast. You've had to listen to every single one, help edit them, help set them up, and now you get to be on the other side of the microphone.
Here we are. Usually start by saying, have you heard any of these? I have. I've heard them.
I'm not going to start that way because you've heard every single one, edited them, tried to come up, pull little weird buzzing sounds out, all of it. So yeah, I'm not going to do that part. You have heard all of them. Actually, you're kind of the one who made this happen. Yeah. I was the most resistant, if I'm honest. I was like, I don't think I want to do that.
This is going to take a lot of time, which it does.
Yeah. Well, that part, it does. I was right about that. But you were like, no, I think it would be the best way to introduce the team and be able for people to hear your voice and what you're thinking about and talk to different people that love the vineyard. So we're doing it. It's actually happening.
So much of my story, in my growth, was sitting in rooms, listening to leaders talk and getting to overhear conversations. And I thought, that's how podcasts work. That's what we can do in that, which I think it's been a good tool. And it's something, there's all the brain science too about the way when it's right in your ears and you're hearing something, what it does. And so it's just such an interesting tool.
You're selling me again. I don't need, we're already doing it. So you already won. I don't need.
Just telling others why it's good.
Oh, okay. You're selling them
on what they're
about
already doing.
Why. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Cool. Yep. Great. Hey guys, let me tell you why this is awesome. While you're listening. Okay. So anyway, so let's start where it all starts, which is where were you born and grew up?
Yeah. So I was born in Youngstown, Ohio.
That's true. I forgot that bit.
Yes. Me and Charles. We were born down the street from each other, basically.
Wow.
And my parents were super young when they had me. So I was a surprise. My dad was playing in bands. He's a musician, has played professionally my whole life. And he was dating, I think, the bass player's little sister. And my mom was dating the drummer. And then they saw each other and the band broke up.
Oh, wow. Yoko.
Yep, that's right. But remarkably, they've stayed together for 40 years.
Yeah,
so that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. That's funny. I didn't know that little bit.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
It's pretty funny.
So they meet in Youngstown, Ohio, of all places.
In Youngstown, Ohio.
Yeah.
Center of
What
mafia.
kind of band was it? Do you know?
Probably like a rock band.
Was it just straight rock?
I think it was straight rock back then. He's done blues and jazz.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's done everything. That's what I was wondering. Wonder what kind of band that was. But
yeah, I think it was just straight rock. They were 19.
Wow.
And so, when they got pregnant with me, my mom then proposed to my dad.
At 19?
Yes, they got pregnant at 19.
Wow.
And had me, I think my mom was 20 when she had me and 21 the next month.
Wow.
And so I guess she got pregnant at 20 then, but you know what I'm saying. So
I do know. And my daughter is 18 presently.
Yep.
Will be 19 actually in a couple weeks.
So just imagine.
I can't.
Yeah.
No, it's actually impossible.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't want to. I choose not to.
That's better. That's better. Yeah.
I choose not to. Yeah, that's young. That's pretty
really
young. Okay, so then they have you. They're still in Youngstown.
They tell a story of bringing me back. They lived in a mansion with biker dudes. And they'd bring me back.
What?
Well, it was like a mansion that got broken into efficiency apartments, but it was all biker dudes. And then they're like the cool musician couple.
Yes.
Bring home the baby. And they said the first night they just threw this rager of a party. And they're like looking down like, we have a freaking baby.
How did this happen?
Like, what are we doing?
Totally. A rager with the bikers.
Yeah.
With your baby. That's a good story.
In Youngstown, Ohio.
That feels like a movie scene.
It does.
Yeah.
It feels about right.
Yeah.
So we grew up there and my dad ended up getting a job in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
So we moved down to Columbus for that. He was also
How
a
old
video
were you
producer.
when they moved? I haven't got the timeline in my mind.
I think I was 3.
Okay. So you're little.
I'm little.
Okay.
I'm little. Maybe 2.5, 3. But that's where I grew up, was in Columbus. And so a lot of my early childhood was going to bars with my dad while he's playing.
Yep.
Once I started reading, I'm like reading a book in the corner, always the only kid because none of their friends had kids yet.
No. Why would they?
And I was an only child. And so...
Which is the best way to be?
An only child.
It's the two of us.
It's true.
Yeah.
Which we both now have 2 girls.
We do.
And so watching the sibling dynamic, I'm like, this is
It's always an education.
Yes.
Like to this day, I'm always like, what is that? Yeah, I still don't know. And Danielle is always like, that's fine. That's normal. I'm like, is it? That didn't seem great. Yeah, that's felt weird. Or man, that was really beautiful in a way I didn't expect. All that stuff. Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so you're the only child in bars playing music. And was it the video job? Did he?
Yeah. So he finished his, he's a picture where he's getting his degree. He has his like ball and cap on, whatever, the cap and gown.
Yeah.
And holding me as a little 2-year-old. And then he gets his first job. And I think he thought he was making big money to move down to Columbus for like $16,000 a year.
Yeah, totally. Well, when you've been in like a rock band, it's like, this is massive.
Totally.
Yeah, right.
Totally.
Yeah.
But that brought us down there.
But it's a real corporate job too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's doing like PR stuff and little training videos.
Yeah.
And
He was always doing the Arnold Schwarzenegger classic, which was a big... So he'd be in like editing rooms with Arnold, doing this stuff. Very funny stuff.
It's so great. Yeah. And I personally love your parents. We've gotten to know each other and I love them dearly. So that I can see it in my mind. I can see your dad doing that. Okay. So then you're growing up in that world and were you in Hilliard all the way through? Or
once we got to Columbus, we were in Worthington.
Everywhere.
We were in Hilliard. My parents were in Upper Arlington. So we were kind of everywhere.
Everywhere. Okay. So you're growing up in that.
Yeah.
And faith isn't really like a part of, like church life isn't like a thing.
No, although later in life I found out some stories. So yeah, I think when they had a kid, as happens in many people's lives, they're like, what are we doing?
We're supposed to do something.
We need some help here. And my dad grew up Catholic. My mom grew up Methodist. And so they, I think, found a little AG church they were going to for just a minute.
Wow, they're like split the middle.
Exactly.
Let's go with AG.
AG.
Yeah. That's funny.
My dad played on the band a little bit.
Wow.
And my mom helped in kids, but that was short-lived. I think some of the pieces around just televangelists in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, what is this whole world?
Yeah, I don't want to do this. Totally.
And so that kind of went out. But I, from an early piece of childhood, had this thing where I was trying to figure out spiritual life and what that all meant. So it was odd looking back, being around like 10 and 12-year-olds now. I'm like, that was bizarre. And I think it was the Lord, but I walked up to the Catholic Church and joined the choir, which I'm married to a musician. My family, I am not a musician. So that was a stretch.
But you tried real hard.
I tried real hard. I sent myself to church camp. I saved some money and sent myself to church camp. Tried some like transcendental yoga stuff with my mom.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually really was
trying
a seeker
stuff
and trying from a young age. Yeah.
That's weird.
It's super weird. Yeah. It's very unusual.
Great. I mean, it's great, but it's weird. Yeah. Okay. So all that's kind of tracking in the background. You're doing school and you're a cheerleader for a minute, right?
Jay, this is why I didn't want to do this podcast. Jay and I have known each other for way too long. All the little things that you could pull out.
Oh, it's so many. I'm going to restrain myself, but that was one. I just got to say that one.
I was a cheerleader. I was talking with some people recently, and they're like, what was your high school superlative? Do you want to guess mine?
It's going to be amazing.
That is what I said. It was most involved.
Oh, that's it.
That checks out.
That does check out. Most involved. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. I got a lot to say there. I'm not going to. See how restrained I am. I'm so restrained. Okay. So you're going through, tell me, and then you start to bump into people who are doing all of these things.
Yeah. So we had a big FCA at my school. There were a couple of local churches that did some great things. We're talking middle high school at this point. Football is big in Ohio. And so they would do these fifth quarters, which looking back was awesome. I mean, it was actually the cool thing to do. Actually. And so people would go to the high school football game. They would come afterwards. There'd be bands and pizza and games. And
it's like a youth group on the back of football.
That's right.
Right.
And I remember the pastor, there was a Methodist church that was doing this. This pastor was a guy named Rob Ramey, who I just love and appreciate so much for his investment in my life at that point. And he would always say, this was true for definitely high schoolers, but he would say, people come where there's excitement and they stay where there's love.
Yeah.
And that's what I experienced, was excitement and fun, but then also love. And even people, there's a guy who's in our church now, Bobby Erskine, him and his wife Missy are dear friends of mine. And Bobby would just pick me up. He was a few years older. He would pick me up, bring me there. And that's really how I came to faith, was in that context and with those people.
Which feels cool when you're a younger high schooler, older high schoolers like, hey, come hang out. You're like, really? Okay. And
absolutely.
So it's this whole vibe. And then when you say you come to faith, is it because they're going, now it's sermon time?
No. That wasn't I actually had a really clear moment with the Holy Spirit. I was at a sleepover with some girls, and there were 8 of us that hang out. We were very much a clique. And some of the girls were exploring faith, and other girls were exploring drinking and drugs. There's lots of things going on in our little circle. And so we were hanging out at a sleepover one night, and I got annoyed that the girls were being too loud. I went into the other room, and I had an experience with the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
Where it just felt like he entered the room. And I had been checking out some youth group stuff, you know, so I'm hearing the gospel message clearer, experiencing the love of community and those people in that Methodist church. But the Holy Spirit fell. And I had, I think, a little bit of context, and my timeline's getting confused, that we would go with the Methodist church to this charismatic camp every summer.
Oh, wow.
And so that was the first time I started to see people laying hands on one another and praying for one another. And it was just this.
And you're 16?
Yeah. No, I would be younger, probably 14.
14. Wow.
Yeah.
And so you're in these kind of weird camp things. Plus you've been in some youth group-ish stuff.
Yeah.
Plus then you've been in sort of this hangout mixed with people who are thinking about life of God and not. And then you just have in a place where you're not actually seeking God necessarily
at all.
You have this encounter.
Yeah.
So now you're like, this is real. So do you go, then you're like, now I guess I'm going to youth group all the time, or?
Yeah. And this is, I always feel funny because people are like, did you have a moment? I actually did. And I don't think that's true for everyone.
No, that's right. It can be a steady.
Yes.
It's like walking into a pool.
Yep.
Versus diving into a pool.
Right. And for me, it was
either way, you're completely wet.
Eventually.
And you're in the deep end one way or another. But yeah, there's different ways in.
Yeah.
Right.
And for me, it was a diving. And it was literally the next week, our youth pastor had left at this point, and they're like, how are we going to run youth group? And they just appointed 4 of us. And they're like, each one of you will speak one Sunday. And I was in immediately. So I'm preaching week 4.
So great. I love it.
And starting to do some of those things, not knowing anything about the Bible.
And how much money would we pay to hear that sermon now? What was it?
It was 1 John. I actually know that.
Wasn't.
I do know that.
That's complex.
It was bad. I'm not saying I exegeted the text well.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just thinking the way to cheat when you don't know what you're doing is pick a narrative, tell the story, be like, isn't this cool? Say 2 things and be done. Yeah. But it's harder to work an epistle and be like, and this is what John's saying here. That's harder work.
It shows how little I knew. I didn't even know to go to the narrative first. I probably did the flip open the Bible.
You read one verse, this is cool. Totally. Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Okay. I was giving you more credit.
No.
Yeah, because it's cool, because narratives just sort of teach themselves in certain ways if you pick the right one. But then epistles can too, other than it takes only 4 seconds to go, I wonder what he's actually saying here.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even know,
you just didn't know to say that.
The
right.
internet was not really
there's no internet. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now you're in leadership, doing all this stuff. You're still finishing high school, doing all your high school things. And that youth group becomes family, becomes a place to connect. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was interesting. It was actually also my first taste of church planting was then, because that youth group, as the Methodist Church, some things changed, new pastor. I mean, now looking back, I'm like, we were probably so problematic for that poor little church.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
But because we're going to the charismatic camp, all this stuff is happening. So that same guy, Rob, and another woman, Joni Taddeo, who was like a second mom to me.
It's great.
We decided to do almost like a church plant. It was like a youth group church plant called Spirit of Faith. And we would have our own little services, and it was booming. I mean, it would it was growing, all this incredible stuff. And then eventually we found the Vineyard through that. So we started going to Joshua House at night to stay connected.
What year is that then?
That would be...
just so I can get it in my mind.
98-ish.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That's
so
hysterical.
Josh House is booming at this point.
We were flying at that point.
Yes, it's the heyday. It was awesome.
Wow. Well, it was awesomely chaotic in a similar way you're describing the other thing. I mean, it was, because I can just remember how just unclear everything. I mean, we're just doing things. And Rich is, of course, helping as a senior pastor at Columbus Vineyard a bit with me and Eric. And, so he has his hands on leaders and Mark Tyndall. But man, it was wild. I mean, the people that were there, and there's people like the whole smoking pit out front and, all this stuff.
I'm sure I was in it at some point.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, and there's all these all the sort of up and coming alternative kind of grunge bands, that would sort of do a stint on our worship team here and there. And it was chaos.
Yep.
Looking back, it's like, what are we doing? I mean, if that happened again today, like right now in Denver, now at my age, I'd be like, we got to make sure we manage this thing. I don't know what this is.
It's true. And if I think back to people who, whatever God was doing in that moment in the late 90s at the Columbus Vineyard at Joshua House, there are so many of us who've been launched into lifelong ministry calls.
Yeah, totally.
Doing significant work in the kingdom.
I mean, I was just, as you know, with a guy who's a major gift fundraising guy with massive hospital systems and whatever. And he just sort of walked in that room sideways. Like he's just a dude. And he's like, and there's stuff that happened in a 3-year window that changed the entire trajectory of my life with God. So it isn't just even the ministry folks. It's like, business guy over here, musician over there. I mean, like random, at varying levels of faith. Retaining their life with God, but it was potent. In every way. Absolutely. Which is cool and scary. I mean, it's a cool thing to have kind of done ministry in, but man, it was weird. It was so intense. There was so much happening.
Yeah.
So you guys all just sort of move in sideways as your mini church plant.
Yep. A whole group of, 30 of us probably.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Just showed up.
Yeah. That's weird. Okay. So then you're doing little things in that. I'll lead a small group. I'll help out with this or that.
Doing the chairs.
Right.
Like whatever it takes,
Yep. And then we fire out as our church plant. That would have been 2001. So we're on the stage.
Yeah.
People pray. We just disappear, go to Denver.
Yep. That night, though, was actually really significant.
Yeah, you've told me this before, yeah.
Yeah, when the church plant's up there, my small group leader was part of your church plant in the early part of it, Tom Beezer.
Oh, yeah.
He was my small group leader.
The Bees.
And he invested everything in me during that season. I mean, was so intentional in his investment in my life. And that's probably been the key theme is, Rob, Joni, Tom, you and Danielle, just different people who have really clearly invested in me, which I'm so grateful for. But when he was up there, I had this emotional response. I'm like sobbing as you're up there. And I remember thinking,
What is this?
I like Tom. Like, Tom's great. I don't even know these other people.
I'm happy for him. Right.
Yeah, that's cool. You're going.
Right.
It's kind of sad, but it's fine. But I knew it was the Lord. And I went home and I journaled that night and I said, Lord, just send me anywhere. Like, I will go anywhere. I'll do anything. I want to, whatever happened up there on that stage as they were being commissioned. Like, I want that for my life.
It's cool.
And plot twist, it turned out it was coming out here to join the church plants.
Yeah. Well, now, because then you didn't come, it was a year later?
It's like 9 months later.
Yeah, I was going to say, it wasn't immediate. Because I remember us being here in the middle of everything we were doing. And if you've ever heard my story, it was chaotic. Like, it didn't go the way, it was not the storybook deal. Half the team's a mess and angry. We're seeing people come into life with Jesus, but it's a nightmare. Danielle and I are not doing wonderfully in the middle of that because it's so intense. And then here's some 18-year-old sitting in front of me in a coffee shop going, I think I'm going to move out to be a part of this church plant. And I remember being like, no.
You're like, don't.
Please don't. Like, you did. It was the opposite of, and things like this, people hear it later and go, oh, that was such an interesting psychological trick. It was not. It was like, I really don't want you to come. It's so messed up here. I think we could hurt you as an 18-year-old, because I'm 25. I'm my ripe age of 25. But I'm still old enough to know this isn't going well. Yep. Like, you don't want to be here right now. And you're like, I remember vividly you looking at me going, but what if it's God? And I'm like, it's probably not God. You're just excited. There's something nostalgic and exciting about this that it just isn't.
Yeah, you're like, Denver's way cooler than Columbus.
That's right.
So
totally. Well, and you're excited about your life with God. And so you're like, hey, I want to do this thing. And I'm like, nah, please don't.
I mean, 20 years later, can we admit, Jay, that I was right?
For sure.
Okay, good.
No, I think we can. Yeah. I was right all the rest of the times.
That's true. That's true. I did not say that's true.
There's many other times. But anyway.
There were many others. I will concede to that. Fine.
But then you're like, okay, I'm coming. And I remember I think I heard it through Tom. Because he's like, Nicole's coming out, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I just told her not to do that. Why is this happening? Turns out people can go anywhere they want in America. Yep. And then, I get to know your folks when they come out, and because they're a little like, what is this? And
oh, yeah.
Is my daughter going to be okay here? And
well, put them, think about being in their shoes now that you have kids that exact same age.
Yeah, I'd be like,
are you joining a cult?
Who are these people?
Yeah, what's going on?
Totally. I remember sitting with your dad and being like, I'll tell you what. I mean, I'm not that old, but I'm going to try and help. Okay. Like I'll keep an eye on her. If you ever have a question, you just call me, and being like, okay, cool. I feel better about this. So that was funny. So you just move out. Did you do art school when you first came out?
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, first I worked at a bank, which drove me to go to art school. And
you had some very exciting roommate scenarios. Because I remember the first however many times meeting with you being like, this crazy thing happened in our house. And I'd be like, well, you have to talk to them. Just like sit them down and be like, this isn't going to work for me. And here's what needs to change. And you'd be like, okay, yeah, for sure. And then it's whatever, a month later, we're sitting having breakfast somewhere. Because I'm working a job at the time. So I like breakfast and like evening.
Or like 9 p.m. meetings.
That's right. Those are my two meeting times. The
life of a church planter.
So we're having breakfast at the Village Inn again a month later. And I'm like, so how did that go? And you're like, ooh, didn't have that conversation.
I think I eventually said baby steps.
Baby steps. You said, I said that I would like to have a conversation. Right. You're like, and I'm like, it's been a month. And you're like, no, it's baby steps. I'm like, wow, that's.
I needed a lot of relational skills. Only child. You got to like figure out how to relate to a roommate for the first time.
I do know, sadly. Danielle knows. Let's put it that way. Right. So, okay. So your bank to art school, we're in the middle of whatever the chaotic, like small groups and building leaders. That's what a church plant is.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. Yeah. By then we would have been meeting. We were just starting to meet every week around then, because it took us a long time. We were doing like once a quarter, for like 2 or 3 quarters.
Yep.
So we're starting to meet every week. So now we're in the middle of all that. You're doing art school. I'm trying to get all the timelines because, I mean, this is like 20 years of time now.
So true. It's a long time
it's
ago.
Like, what happens next?
I have an embarrassing admission.
What?
I had to pull up my own LinkedIn to remember like the order of what happened in your driveway just a second ago. I was like, what year was that?
I'm like, it's all, because it all kind of just smashes together in my mind. Because then I think the next kind of key waypoint would be us realizing that downtown we have a conglomeration of things.
That's right. I mean, I lived downtown because I was going to art school in downtown Denver. And we were starting to see people exploring and coming to faith down there. So there's several small groups. There's kind of a whole creative community. And what's true now, I think, in most major cities, what was already becoming true in Denver is folks who lived in Denver were not going to come to Arvada. The Arvada Vineyard, like, I think I've seen that on the way to the mountains, that exit. But
and the irony is I remember clocking it. It was like 12 or 13 minutes.
That's right.
Okay. Because in Arvada, we're on the freeway. We're in the southeast corner. So I'm thinking, this isn't that far, but it's like worlds apart.
Culturally worlds apart.
Right.
And so the people that, you know, me and others who were living downtown were seeing come to faith were never going to come to Arvada.
Right.
And so that's when we started exploring what would it look like to have an expression of our church in downtown Denver that works for those people.
Yep. And then we're going, I remember sitting with you and a little crew of folks and going, so you guys want to plant a church? That'd be great. You should just do that. How do I help you do that? And almost unanimously being like, no, we don't want to plant a church. No. I'm like, well, what are the options here? Be like, well, what if we were like another thing, but like we were a part of this, but we were down there. And I remember just not having enough of being like, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
What would that mean? I don't know what that means. And then that sent us on a little journey of like looking at the different satellite models around the country. So it was like, okay, well, what if we just thought of it like another service downtown? I remember that being like the boring solution.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll drive down there and we'll do it all again Sunday night.
Yep.
I think when we started, it was the same worship team.
That sounds right. It was certainly the same sermon.
Right. So it's the same team. So they would like lead worship in the morning.
Yep. Have
like the day free, and then we would all show up and set up and do it all again Sunday night, which wasn't tenable.
No.
Because that's a lot for a whole, but I mean, I'm trying to think. I think in the end that was maybe 8 years, 7 or 8 years of almost every Sunday night.
Yeah.
Where I'm doing, and then of course the morning stuff's growing. So I remember at one point I was doing 5 or 6 talks a day.
Yep.
Between a couple different sites, because in that model we start to stretch. So then it's Northwest and different places, and I would drive back and forth. Sometimes I would preach in Arvada, go to Northwest, come back to Arvada.
Yep. Yep.
Do 2 more, then do the night.
Yeah.
And then somewhere else sometimes, then Lakewood sometimes. So I do 4 locations counting Denver, same sermon,
Brutal. Different
worship teams. Well, I don't know. I mean,
more fun.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, some of it's I don't know. That was energizing for me, which might be a sickness, but it was creating a model on accident.
Yep.
In a sense. And then that's growing and changing and developing. And at first, we were thinking as a team, but then it's like, Nicole, I think you should lead this.
Yeah. Which was terrifying. I mean, I was 24.
Yep.
I was single.
Yep.
Just still navigating so much of life. I mean, there's so much in that window, being a young adult, out of college. I mean, all the different pieces. Vineyard had really become clear about women in ministry.
That's right. We just said that. Right? Yep.
So all of these different pieces firing at the same time, the insecurities, I mean, just all the things. And yet it was so exciting.
It was pretty fun.
It was so fun. And I even think back on the Sundays where you wouldn't come. Sometimes I would sit in Arvada, listen to your sermon. You'd give me the notes.
Yeah, just
I'd go to a coffee shop in the afternoon.
Yeah, make it
the
yours.
text, make it mine, and preach it at night.
Yep.
And what interesting training for what we're doing now, too. I mean, I feel like we can work as a team as your communications director in a way that God was preparing back then that I would have never known.
Yep. What I liked about what we did when I look back is we allowed the mission to drive the model, right?
That's
like
right.
We're looking at it going, okay, there's this thing happening.
Mm-hmm.
How do we just respond to that? As opposed to, I think a lot of the sort of church planning or satellite models are more like a risk board. Could we go here and do this, or could we go there and do this? Ours was the exact opposite. Like, I don't know, we have people that God seems to be doing stuff with in this part of town. What do we build to facilitate that the best way? Is it a church plant? Is it is it like a pure satellite? Is it sort of this other hybrid, it's a neighborhood church or whatever? Because then at the same time, we have people that we're planting churches with.
Yeah.
In Denver. So again, it wasn't like we were fixed into a model.
Yep.
Because then it's in the middle of that this other crew shows up to want to plant.
Yeah.
So then we start having that conversation. I'm like, well, maybe we should help them plant. Mm-hmm. Which ended up getting you married. So it worked out great.
It was really great. The church plant didn't work out, but my life worked out a lot better.
Because in a sense, we sent you with some folks to be like, okay, we'll still help support by way of sending effectively staff and some leaders help bid this church. And that's how you meet Jason. He's here to do worship. That doesn't work.
Well, it works with Jason.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. The church doesn't work. That's important. I qualify my objects here. Yeah. Subject, object. Yeah.
I'm here to help your communication.
Yes.
Jason.
Thank you. Thank you. I misspoke. What I meant to say was worked wonderfully with Jason.
Yep.
Church plant didn't work.
Right.
But then you're like, okay, now I'm working this other job, but I can help with another church too. So now there's another vineyard that's in the southeast part of the town.
Yep.
Who needs worship help. So now Jason is sort of worship leader there. Mm-hmm. Plus you're kind of helping run that church. We're still in connection while it's happening. So you just keep bouncing from ministry context to ministry context while working, doing art stuff. So when I think about all that, when you think back on that, does that feel chaotic or does that feel led? Like maybe in the moment it feels chaotic.
Right.
But now in retrospect.
It actually feels more chaotic in some ways looking backwards. Like, why did we do all of that? Like these decisions. Well, and honestly, we had dear friends be like, I think you guys are flaky. Like, why are you going from thing to thing? And
what does this mean?
Why can't you commit somewhere? Every time though, very clearly we heard the voice of God.
You thought you were doing the next thing.
Yeah, we thought we were doing the next thing, what was available to us, what God was asking us to do. Mm-hmm. I still think that. So even if I think less than chaotic, I would say it was unusual. It was intense. Yeah, because each thing we're describing, we're saying it sort of in the Reader's Digest version. It's, and then we just did that. And we did that. Mm-hmm. What isn't being told in there, which anyone who's done these kinds of transitions, is the emotional intensity of, man, I've been really connected to these leaders in this community. And now I'm doing this other thing. And it's shifting the way my relationships all work. And Jason moved here to be a part of a church plant. And then he has to be like, well, I guess we're not doing that. And anyone's done that. That's super emotional. That isn't like you don't do that move going, I don't know, this will be fun, I guess. You do that going, the Lord of heaven and earth has sent me from Michigan to the pagan wilderness of Denver. Grand Rapids to Denver.
Yeah, and you've got videos and visioning slogans and that's the same kind of thing it takes to do the thing in downtown. That's the same thing it takes to be like, okay, we're here at this other vineyard church, or I'm now taking this job, all the jobs you've done with communications, either with TEDx or whoever. Each of those things feels like I'm trying to do this thing God has asked me to do.
Yeah.
Highly emotional, intense. And then each of the things we just described has a sense of loss connected to it.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute. I thought this was going to do these three things. It did one of them, or it did none of them, or it did two of them, or it did two other things that were the three things I thought of in me, and it produced fruit, but not the kind of fruit I imagined. So when you think back on that, how do you think you just stayed doing all these things? Like, why not just be like, nah? I mean, there's any number of folks listening that I've noticed in ministry that, the one thing doesn't go the way you want for yourself or for the ministry, and then you're like, nah.
Yeah.
I'm now a car salesman, or more than that, I'm not even going to church at this point.
Right.
That's enough of this.
Yep.
When you think back on Jason, why keep doing things? I mean, seriously.
Yeah. Right. I think there's like a couple key things that come to mind. One would be when we got married, we made a commitment to each other that we were going to lean into risk and community. It's like literally community is in our vows. We just had our 9th wedding anniversary, and I looked at our vows again, like I do every year. And we literally wrote in there intentionally that we will live into the community that Jesus puts in front of us.
We're committed to a people.
Right. We're committed to a people, and we're committed to risk. We don't want to live comfortably. And for me, that hasn't meant going to like the shores of Africa or something like that, but it's meant, what does it look like to live within risk in the context of this city and in this place? And sometimes within, a non-ministry job. So I think, there's been a lot of ways that has happened over the years, but that's been a commitment we've made in our marriage that I think has been really important. I also remember a really key conversation, Kathy Litton, who is my friend Kate Marshall's mom. We were talking probably during one of those key transition moments, and I think it was actually as I was transitioning out of pastoring the Denver hub, which was what we were talking about earlier. Yeah. And I was kind of thinking about working outside of ministry. Like first I just worked at like a fashion boutique, and then then I worked at TEDx, and I did all these things. And she said, Nicole, when you're called to be a pastor, and you could probably put any other number of things in that blank of being called to be those things. Yeah. You're going to show up as that. That is actually a key calling, that you're going to show up in the workplace, in a secular
job. Doesn't matter where.
Doesn't matter when you're parenting, when you're, this is something that God has placed in you from a deep place of calling. Yep. And that set something with me in that conversation between Kathy and I, where I thought, that's true. And it's going to be different percentages. I've been in and out of full-time ministry and 10% of ministry, at different points. But I know that I've been called to this. And God gets to write what that looks like in different seasons. And that doesn't mean it's not painful. I mean, it was freaking painful for a lot of those transitions.
Yeah, it's awkward.
But that's been set in me, that he gets to turn up and down the dials of percentages and what things look like in different seasons. But I can stay at the core, know what I'm committed to. So I think that's been really important. And there's something, 20 years in one place with the same general community. Yeah. People know and see you. I can think of moments where I was in rooms with you and Danielle, and you said, you're not showing up like yourself.
Yeah, I'm concerned, right?
I'm concerned. Like, what's going on here? And to have people who know you has been such a gift, and is the fruit of being committed to one spot for all this time, which is unusual. And I recognize that. Every month, we introduce a new book or recommended resource to dig in deeper. For the last quarter of 2023, we'll be focusing on gospel proclamation. And this month, we're recommending that you read The Gospel Precisely by Matthew Bates. The Gospel Precisely is available wherever books are sold.
It doesn't have to be unusual.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, it is a choice. And there's a number of things you said there. It's saying early on, I'm committed to a certain kind of ministry, a certain way of being with people. Those are two huge things. I think the third thing you're saying, which you're not saying directly, is a choice to be the kind of person who's submitted and connected to leaders. Yeah. So the people I know that make it through the things that, like you're described, is they still keep saying, I'm going to allow leaders to speak in my life. Like the way you described your realization is, Kathy said to me, okay, so you're still saying, I'm going to talk to and ask questions of people who have leadership on their life. And I'm going to let them talk to me about what they see and don't see, and how they make sense of my life from their vantage point. My experience is people that don't move well through the transitions you're describing start shrinking or eliminating the voices. They might still keep their peer relationships. Yeah. They might even be in kingdom-ish stuff, But they usually don't last that long if they don't allow voices to speak into their life.
Yep.
Like they start shrinking the scope, or they just eliminate because the transitions are costly. Like, I mean, in order to do the kinds of things we're talking about doing, whether it's what we're doing right now in the vineyard or church planting or pastoring, you have to be sort of idealistic. You have to be like, what if we were a part of the next revival or something? You know, like you have to have like a part of you that's like, what if God did something that could change everything, right? You have to have some level of that. If you don't have some level of that, you don't do these things. I mean, why, you're not, I don't know, maybe there are some people that do them that don't think that way, but I think that's the exception, not the rule. There's maybe really healthy 25-year-olds that are like, just here to pastor, long obedience in the same direction kind of vibe. Like
that wasn't me though. Yeah.
It's not most anybody I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to have some of that. But then you also have to have the resiliency to go, when it didn't quite go the way I wanted to go. That doesn't mean it wasn't worth it. That doesn't mean there isn't another thing. It doesn't mean somehow I did something wrong or somebody else did something wrong, though they may have, and I may have.
Yeah.
Okay, so that might be true, but that doesn't have to be the way God wants to lead me into the next thing. Those kind of levels of maturity, resiliency, trust in leaders, that's a very difficult combination of things. Like right now, there could be any number of people listening that your next action step is to go back to leaders and say, what did I not quite get out of that last lap?
Yep.
What do you see that I didn't see?
Yep.
A, and then B, who are the leaders that get to help you now?
Yeah.
They might not be the same set of people. Can be some different people. But who gets to say, can I talk to you about this moment we're in that, man, I think there's a next run for you here. There's a thing that I'd want you to pay attention to or focus on, or there's a thing I want to care for in your life. Lots of times people just stop that way of interacting in the world. And the people that do that, I very rarely see them thrive.
Yeah.
They start to come apart spiritually, relationally. Marriages come apart, even professionally. They might be successful, quote unquote. They make money, but man, they're in danger. Some weird stuff starts happening to their family or where else. So when you think about that, so you're not a church kid, but yet you still keep trusting people to help you in your life. Well, how do you make sense of that? You're an only child, so you're not like aware of a family vibe.
Yeah. I've had to learn that over time. Yeah.
Or it's just a miracle. You'd be like, I don't know. It's just sovereign.
Yes, some of it is sovereign.
Right.
I also think some of it is the quality of leaders I've submitted myself to over the years. Like I can think that the other part that you didn't say that I can think about is moments where it's been, can I go back to this? Can we talk about something that happened a couple years ago?
Yes.
Here's the story I've been telling myself ever since.
Can we fix this? Right.
Yeah. Is that the story? Is that how you experience
What do you
this?
think?
What do you think?
Yep.
I can remember a really distinct dinner between you and Danielle and Jason and I.
Yeah.
At a Mexican restaurant, talking through when I left staff and, when we did other things, what happened there? And realizing I had been telling myself some stories for years.
I'm happy for you. Yeah.
Totally.
Right.
And I was like, I kind of thought you'd be mad all these years, but
totally. Yep.
I think there's something to be said for people to be able to keep those relationships and let that trust build. But then also on the receiving end of the other leader, like if you have someone coming back to you to clear up a mess from years in the past, give them space.
Do the work. Yeah.
Do the work.
Yes.
Admit where you could have shown up differently.
Totally.
Yep. Where we've both grown, all of those.
I don't know.
pieces.
I think 25-year-old Jay was pretty great. I'm just kidding. He actually wasn't very good. Yeah, he was very well intended. I'll give him that, but that's about it. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So leaders have to do their job, which is hard to do because leaders need to grow in their ability to hear, challenge, lead more effectively, frankly, interrogate themselves.
Yeah.
Look back over their life and go, that probably wasn't the best, but I don't know. It was probably the best I could do then, but I can do different now. People have to keep choosing to be submitted and connected to leaders, which they don't tend to. even if they're transitioning through different kinds of work. So I'm thinking about you doing, different kinds of stuff with TEDx or, with startups. You're doing all kinds of entrepreneurial cool things that aren't technically like you're not getting a check from a church.
Right.
But you're still church person. You're like, I'm helping build this church, or I'm doing this thing with leaders, and then Jason, in that sense, he is kind of worship guy in that window. So like the sort of levels are going up and down, and even in your marriage, like I'm doing less, he's doing more. All these things are changing.
When you throw kids into that too, we had 2 babies and really bad pregnancies.
Yes.
And I remember the first time that Jason was leading in Arvada for worship, and he'd been leading there pretty consistently, but I had hyperemesis through my pregnancies, so I could barely show up in rooms for most of my pregnancies. And I walked in, I'm meeting someone during the meet and greet, and they're like, "Hi, what's your name?" And I was like, "Nicole." And I said something like, "That's my husband, Jason." They're like, "Oh, you're Jason's wife." And I remember just being enraged, like, I helped plan this for you.
You don't know who I am.
You don't know who I am?
Totally. Totally.
But that was the season. And, so there were definitely moments where we're invested in different ways.
One, looking back on, even that church plant, different church plants I know, and how many of those folks don't make it through those changes in their life with God and even their heart for the church. And somehow being able to be like, okay, I guess I'll go lead worship over here.
Right.
I'm still me. I mean, that's what I showed up to do. I guess I'll just do that over here. It's kind of a miracle. I mean, there is something sovereign about that.
Yep.
But I think it's right. You saying, no, my commitment is to community. Our commitment is to a certain kind of life of risk with God. And I'm adding a third that you didn't put in your vows necessarily, which is commitment to leadership in our life. We're going to let leaders, we're going to initiate those conversations.
Right. Proactively seek out.
Yeah. Hey, what do you see? What don't you see? What should I be working on? What do you want to tell me about this last bit? What do you want to encourage me for the next bit? That's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's very rare.
I think the other thing I'm aware of as we're talking is just the way that marriage works in all of this. Like, I'm not pretending that Jason and I have a perfect marriage. We are working on it. We're still early on. We're only 9 years in, And the way that when you leave a space, you can either kind of stir up discontent between the two of you or keep calling one another to the things that that you're committed to.
Come on, let's figure this out.
Right. And we've had moments of that. We've had moments where we were, can we stay at Mile High? Can we stay in the Vineyard? Should we do this? Do I even want to go to church anymore? I mean, my own mini deconstruction and reconstruction that didn't feel as deep as some folks who I see who grew up in the church, but I had that, a few years ago. And
loss has to be explained.
Yes, that's right.
Emotionally. You have to look at your life and go, this isn't what I thought was going to happen.
Yep.
What does that mean?
Yep.
And you have to assign that somewhere. Mm-hmm. Is that me? Is that the leader? Is that God himself?
Yeah.
Is that these people? Is
this all a
this
sham?
place? What is doing what?
Yeah.
And I've always felt that deconstruction, a lot of that is it's an assignment problem.
Yeah.
There must be something wrong with God. There must be something wrong with church as a thought. Period.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yep.
You got to sign that somewhere.
Yep.
Was this leader just a bad person?
Yeah.
Or incomplete or whatever. So in your own mini deconstruction, Jason's going, come on.
Yeah.
Stay in it.
Like I remember the national conference in Denver. He looked at me and he said, "We're never leaving the Vineyard, Nicole. These are our people. You know that. I know that." And I was like, I do know that. These are our people,
yeah, right.
But it's having a spouse, like I'm a strong personality. And so I believe I married well for someone who will speak truth to me.
Yes.
And there's times where we spiral down together and there's times where we spiral up together, all the things. But to be able to say those and call one another to the things that you know are true.
That's good.
About yourselves, about the Lord, about the community that you're in, about your leaders.
Yeah.
We've had to do that for each other over the course of all of these transitions over the years.
Yeah, because then you finally find some level of equilibrium with church and professional life and whatever. And in walks Jay as a new national director who says, hey, we have this comms position.
Yeah.
And you're like, nah.
Oh, I said, yeah, no. I remember getting...
I just struck the balance, okay? I just figured this out.
Yeah.
All this loss, confusion, all the different ministry things. My professional life kind of works.
Yep.
I still love, I'm in church. I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
Why would I disrupt this again?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, how about you just pray about that for a minute? And then let's see what's next. So then what makes you say, okay, I'm going to clock back in?
To more full-time ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I had been at TEDx, been a COO there and doing, all the creative things there, and at this company that helps startups grow, all these different things, which were really cool. I think God, you can be really good in the workplace if you use some of the skills that you were already using in ministry, like
totally
being prophetic with the people that you're leading. And
totally. Yeah, if you actually pray.
Yeah,
like God could lead you.
That's right. You look like an amazing manager.
Totally.
When you're like backed by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, you're hearing God. Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, career was going really, really well. And there was always something missing. Even the last company I was in, we're doing all this stuff around with the murder of George Floyd and all the things happening in 2020 and all this DEI work, and just being like, I guess I could make a career out of that. Like I could go do that the next place. But there was always an extra gear you can't quite go into in the same way. And for me, that felt like dissonance. Like there's still something missing there. So I met with some of the team that was forming, the different people who were there. And then I remember I decided to contract for the Vineyard to help with the hiring process. I have a consulting business around HR and all those pieces. And so we needed to create a really thorough process to hire this national team. And so I was not on the national team at that point, but constructed the process and helped lead our team through it.
Projects and like a whole HR management system that redacted names and had input. And I mean, it was
400 interviews.
Layers and layers and layers. Yeah. Right.
It was brutal.
Well, it was professional.
Yeah.
It was the way companies do that.
It's the way, any other startup that I talked to or a large organization. But I remember a distinct moment as we were interviewing the team, and I closed my laptop because we're doing it all over Zoom, and I just thought, oh, I really like these people. And it was seeing the national team that was forming, even the multi-generational level. I've been, at both companies I was at as a COO, I was working with Gen Z and millennials who are awesome and awesome. And I had not worked with a boomer in a really long time. Right. And so just to kind of see the quality of people there that was forming in our national team, all of a sudden I was like, oh no, I want this. Like I want to be part of these people and get to serve the movement that has invested so deeply in me for 2 decades. 2 decades plus, honestly. And so it started to shift some things. And I think I started to be able to see some of the lines. I don't know that we always have these moments of clarity where we see all the things in retrospect. And you're like, that's why God did this, and then this, and then this. But I started to see the church planting, the ways that, leading in the vineyard, my art degree, working in the marketplace, and the way that the things that I learned in the years of doing that could come back and serve the movement and serve the kingdom.
Yep. So it sovereignly started to align.
Yeah.
But then that's a whole sacrifice of like all these different worlds I've been in, I'm now stepping out of.
Yep.
Stepping back into church world in a whole new way, of course. I mean, in a national, it's way more prolific.
Yeah.
So what do you think you've been learning or seeing differently about the Vineyard as a whole, even the work we're trying to do? It's a very different vantage point.
Yeah.
To look at across the whole movement. You've been in now the majority of the regional conferences. You've been in leadership team meeting rooms that you would have not been in any of those rooms before. What are you seeing that's shifting or changing? Or as you think about comms, even for the whole Vineyard, historically, we've not had this position. So anyone who's listening who's a Vineyard pastor, you've probably noticed we're talking more.
Yeah.
Number one, from the center, because we have somebody thinking about that. We're talking probably more clearly, i.e. we're aiming at certain kinds of things because then we didn't have the workforce. So people might experience a difference, but what are you seeing when you think about the work we're trying to do? What's been new or exciting or challenging?
Yeah, that's good. My entire vineyard experience has been in like 3 or 4 vineyards, right? So I have Columbus Vineyard, Mile High Vineyard, Smoky Hill Vineyard, which is more medium-sized church, and then church plants.
Church plants, right.
So I thought I understood the diversity of the Vineyard because I could be like, oh, mega church, medium-sized, church plants.
Right.
I had no idea
how different we are. Totally.
Yes. And so meeting, just our army of bivocational pastors.
Yeah.
And being like, wow, these people are putting in 40, 60 hours at their job. And then they're going and they're leading this church. And in rural towns, in places where there's no budget. I think the resiliency of our pastors has been really incredible to see, and the diversity of that.
Yep.
And also that's a comms challenge. I recognize different people need to hear different things at any given moment. And so how do we make sure that the right communication is happening at the right time?
Very different needs.
In the right ways. Yeah, absolutely. And yet the common threads. I think that that's part of the reason why we're doing this podcast is there is, the experience, or as you talked about the regional conference, what's the animal? I just lost it in my mind.
The musk ox.
The musk ox.
Yeah.
There's a scent to the vineyard.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it draws us to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if I'm talking to a rural pastor, a bivocational pastor, a New York City pastor, whatever it is, there is a scent and there's a way of which I'm like, this is family and we look different.
Yep.
But the commonality and diversity, I think it's actually stronger than I realized.
Yes, I agree. Yep. It is very different. And and the sort of, exactly to your point, like the things that different kinds of pastors need by way of communication is different because of the diversity and the context is different. But it's more than that. So many folks in the Vineyard have come in through different doors based on the region, based on their own church history experience. Some of the work that you've been helping us think about is how do we describe who we are more intentionally? So we're diffuse and a lot different, which is a good thing, but it also makes it difficult to define us in a way that's helpful to folks that are maybe looking into the Vineyard. Do we think about planning, for example, like a national conference? How do we describe the diversity of what we're doing by way of expressions, but then also create cohesion? I think Caleb and I, as we were working on the reorg stuff, and then as we've been leading, the thing that's been most interesting is you realize how much of what we do as people in ministry is comms. Yeah. How everything sort of falls to comms, or comms drives you to be clear. So that comms says, okay, and as you know, I've joked with you, I just call you comms. We're in a meeting, and I'm like, what does comms want to say? but that comms says, okay, what should this print piece say about how we're thinking about missions? And you're like, oh, okay, well, there's more than one thing to say, but you're right. If we say everything, it's like we've said nothing. So how do we speak more specifically? Or comm shows up and says, so I heard 5 things. I don't know how those fit together. So much of what, and we've joked that I'm obsessed with The West Wing. If nobody's watched The West Wing, you should watch that show. But how so much of what forces decision-making is comms. What are we going to say in the press conference?
Yeah.
What is the print piece? How do we have the conversations before the conversation in order for leaders to know what we're doing or do the next thing? There's a level of sophistication that sometimes in here, because we've just been like, well, we don't have the manpower and we have so much diversity. So I don't know, we're just going to do the best we can. But now that we have you in the chair, plus we have some more workforce, plus frankly, we're asking larger questions about what's it mean for us to do succession and to grow and to work with people who are coming towards us from the outside. We're getting a lot clearer, which is a lot of work.
Yeah.
That it used to be maybe people would be from maybe another era where it's like, well, it's whatever Wimber says.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like
it's we have comms what Wimber says.
Exactly. And so how much are we saying, well, okay, this is what Wimber said, therefore, or how much are we saying, well, Wimber said that, but now we're saying this a little differently, or it's a continuation of that. That you've done a lot in every meeting. Like, so are we saying this? Or are we saying that? Or how's this fit with that? Those are all thoughts we've not necessarily had to figure out. And then thinking about the context. How would that relate differently to different people? And then to make it more complicated, how do we think about associations? We're thinking about being diverse.
Yeah.
Which means we have different audiences in mind so that we can grow those voices that have maybe been quieter or more marginalized? How are those more central to how we're thinking? So that we match the mission of the kingdom for every tribe, tongue, and nation. So you've done a great job helping us think about that. So when you think about like what you're doing, let's ask a personal thing first, because I want to talk about the functional stuff. And you think about all the ways that sovereignly God prepared you. There might be any number of folks listening who are like, well, I'm in the banking world, or I work in government, or I'm in PR. And man, I listen to this because I love my church, or some vineyard pastor said I should listen to this because I'm in a vineyard. How should people be thinking in sort of the more professional space about how they're a part of the vineyard?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think about it, on the local context, pastors have an eye for these people and don't say no for them.
Yes.
I think when we look and we're like, oh, they're so busy. They're a COO here. They're an entrepreneur.
They run this business.
Whatever they do.
Yep.
They must be too busy.
Right.
They're probably looking for an inroad to use their very specific gifts.
Yes.
In a way that makes a lot of sense for the kingdom and for your church. And so don't say no for them. Ask. Also, respect the fact that they have a job. I think that
they might not be able to do all you'd want them to do.
They can't show up at every meeting. They're not going to do it. But if you can whittle where they're going to be most potent in your church for the kingdom and let them run there, it's going to benefit you. Not to mention, they're the people who actually work in the workplace. They are around the people who don't know Jesus. They're around the people who, and if they can show, hey, there's a space for me here. This is how this community has shaped and influenced my life. This is where I'm getting to have impact, to give away all of those things. That's inspiring.
That's good.
And so I think creating that space for them and having those conversations and being okay. Maybe they're not your every Sunday kids worker. Maybe they are. Maybe that's actually the easiest time for them.
Right.
But maybe they are the person who can help you think creatively about the budget or about this comms challenge or about your next sermon series.
Yes.
Thinking about how that would play out for their friends who are professional in those workplaces.
That's good.
And then the flip side of it, for the professional who's working in the workplace, know that what you have is so valuable. Most of our pastors and leaders, they don't have a business degree. They've been working on crafting a very specific set of skills that is their job. And this brings us back to we are a body. And so do what you do really well. And maybe, I think people are always like, oh, business people can go make money and just tithe more, give more. Do that. Absolutely. Be generous.
I would agree with you should do that.
Do that.
Right.
100%. Do that until it hurts. Do that.
Right. Totally.
And know that the skills and the talents that God has put in you is actually to serve the body too. And it's not just about making money. It's about the creative things that are in you. If you're a communications person, if you're a photographer, if you're, or about the business acumen that God's given you.
Yes.
All of that is actually for the kingdom. It's
Real
not
estate,
just for your company. Yeah, absolutely.
Everything. Well, and because most pastors get into ministry through a very particular set of gifts and calling. So they love the Bible, they love people, they love prayer, whatever. One of those, some combination of all of those. If a church starts to grow or even just form, suddenly a pastor is asked to do 100 things they didn't agree to. So they're like, I guess I have to know something about real estate. I guess I have to know something about a budget and a spreadsheet. I guess I'm in the HR game now. I have to know how insurance benefits work and how to hire people. And I guess I have payroll. I don't know anything about any of this stuff. Or now I'm in the PR game. I guess I need a sign and a logo, or I'm in the technology game. I need to know about websites, I guess. And then they always will end up in something legal.
Yeah.
I guess I have a legal obligation. I have bylaws and I have some kind of a insurance plan I have to run that's based on if I get sued or, oh my gosh, I guess I have. And so about any professional arena that somebody's working in, if a church is developing in any way, you're useful in a very specific area for a pastor who shouldn't become an expert in that area.
Right. That's right.
Sadly, I think because I wasn't smart enough to know otherwise, I just became experts. I'm hanging drywall, for example. I should never have been doing that. I'm Like I can actually edit audio and video now. I should not have learned to do that. Someone could have helped me. I just was like, I don't know. I guess I have to do this. It's likely your pastor is right now looking at some kind of contract that they shouldn't be looking at. That you as a business person can go, just let me look at this thing. Let me help negotiate this for you. Because I do this all day, every day. It's not a big deal. Let me do the real estate part. Just get out of the way. Let me help our church. And let me tell you some options. So it's your professional skills, but it's also the thing you said, which is the vetting. You know, even if pastors think about professionals as just people who vet stuff, like I'll do most of the work.
Yeah.
Can you look at this contract? I'm going to do most of the work. Do you think this website works? And have an art person go, no, that actually doesn't. It doesn't work. It functions. Can I just give your 10 minutes could change like their 20 hours or their 200 hours. Now, move this here, wash this way. Let me let 2 designers fix this for you. Those things are vetting. And then you're also vetting on behalf of the people you're connected to. So you're saying, good pastors look at professionals and say, would you bring people to our church?
Yeah.
If you wouldn't, why?
Yeah.
And if you won't bring them to our church, what would you bring them to? Mm-hmm. And how do we create that environment? So I remember early on with you, we're creating benefit concerts and art shows and random stuff because I'm going, well, let's just do that.
Yeah.
And then we saw a bunch of people come into life with Jesus just by creating an alternate experience that a guy like me, people in our church could wander around in and just be friends with. And then they eventually kind of inch their way towards a church or community, or even if they don't, we're sort of in the background of their life now. Like if they need something or if they're trying to think about faith, they call.
When crisis hits.
That's exactly right.
They know where to call.
Yes. Yeah. So we create, but that doesn't happen unless you're vetting your community to say, okay, so you're a lawyer, you play golf with these people and or you do this kind of cool cocktail business thing. What would it be like for us to do that as a church with your folks? You're probably not going to get them to Sunday. How could I be helpful to you? Or what kind of environment would enable us to do that? And either person can initiate that conversation.
Right.
The lawyer can, or the pastor can, or the business person, or the real estate person. That can be initiated from any direction, but it has to be initiated. Mm-hmm. It isn't just, thank you for your money. Thank you for serving on our board, which also is like a nice way to serve a church. But how do we create context that we share together on behalf of the people that you know that don't have any life with God, or the connections you have in the city if you're a government leader?
Yeah.
How is it that the city and we can partner without compromising either of us? You're the conduit. How do we do that?
Yeah.
I don't know that most pastors or most professionals think about the things I'm describing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I just go to church. It's nice. And they asked me to lead a small group, so I lead one of those.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's nice. But you have all this bank of resource, skill and talent and professionalism that you're like, the church seems to be doing fine.
Right.
Well, odds are they could use your help.
Absolutely. And I think it helps to know that counts. Like,
boy, does it count.
Yeah. I mean, I remember in the Josh Faust days, church planting, all those things, I just thought for me to actually be sold out and give my life for the kingdom, I guess I had to plant a church.
Yeah.
And so I did, with our church and all those pieces. And ultimately, that wasn't as fulfilling for me. I wasn't finding the joy there.
Well, you're built for a different thing.
Right. Absolutely.
And then you get to, in the sovereignty of God, now here you are again. But that was not expected.
No, in no way. And so, but to know your life for the kingdom counts.
Yeah, it matters. Totally.
Exactly how you're made, exactly who you are.
Yeah.
It matters for your local church. It matters for the vineyard. It matters for the kingdom.
Yeah.
So be fully who you are.
Yes.
Completely, fully. Be the best in your industry that you absolutely can.
Yes.
Get really, really good. And use every one of those gifts that the Lord has given you for the kingdom. Give them back. Give back to your church. Serve your pastors.
Yes.
And create the environments where those that only you are talking to, only you can reach in your workplace, you know, create the environments where they want to show up and they can be encountered by the living God.
Yes. Be a conduit and be a resource, at the very least vetting, if not developing. And you know that you and I have been talking with some of the different business folks that we know have this in their heart of like, how could we facilitate either nationally or regionally, or even coaching pastors, ways of identifying leaders like this. I mean, the classic old language is marketplace or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the wrong, I don't know. I suppose that's okay. I just think it's strange because the truth is pastors in the workforce are the vast minority.
Yeah.
Right? Like 0.1% or whatever. So it seems strange to inflate the 0.1% as though they're equal with the,
Right.
I think we might just call it being a Christian.
Yeah.
Like a follower of Jesus in the world. Pastors should just be eliminated from the list of things. So what does it look to equip the saints? Maybe use Vineyard language.
Absolutely.
For the sake of the work of ministry, where you are, not just within what we do on a Sunday, that's the minority, that's the small percentage. The vast majority is where you work every day. How do we get that work done? And what would it look like in the Vineyard if even we were helping equip pastors to do that work and or create environments where we talk with people like this?
Yeah.
About some of the things we're dreaming about in the Vineyard and supporting their local church. So we're trying to figure that out. I don't quite know how to do that, what we commonly call marketplace. But certainly if you're listening and you're like, well, I'm a banker, I'm a lawyer, I'm in real estate, I would love to be helpful in my local church. How could I be a part of that? Or what is Vineyard USA dreaming about that would help stretch that? I think we're going to be continuing those conversations. I'm not exactly sure how to do that, but okay, so let's end with this. So when you think about the moment you're in the comms, you're trying to do the Vineyard, what are the ways that people should pray for or be praying for the work that you feel burdened for with the Vineyard right now? Like, what do you think God is asking of you in your role? I'm trying to help the Vineyard talk more clearly, more specifically. I'm trying to help us have an outward-facing look towards the larger world and the larger body of Christ. That's a lot of things to be trying to do at the same time. So where do you feel the burden or the place for prayer or for wisdom or empowerment or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, wisdom is the overarching piece there, because you're never talking to just one room. I can pretend like I'm sending out an email just to our senior pastors. Right. That goes beyond.
Goes everywhere.
At any time you're talking to everyone. Yes. And I think you can be as specific as you want to in that, but also recognize that. And so
it carries to wherever it goes.
It does.
Right.
And for me, this is just how I'm wired. Mm-hmm. My burden as someone who didn't grow up in church and came to faith is always for those who are watching.
Yes.
Who are watching from the outside saying, what is this whole Jesus thing? What are these people about? And so
which is, for me, social media is the most interesting frame for that.
Yeah.
So for example, when Christians are beating each other up on social media in front of the whole world, people like folks in our family who don't have faith, you and me, say, what is this?
Absolutely.
And so I don't think Christians think about, like when they blog or they do what they do, they're not thinking about the folks that we've been investing our life in that don't have life with Jesus, who are watching. There's been guys I play golf with that they're connected on Facebook, and then they're like, why would people talk to you like that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, they're Christian pastors. I don't know.
Right.
And, even some of them, because they're not believers or whatever, and they love me, they're like, you just tell me there, I'll go rough them up. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. But they're trying to offer their support, not being a believer. So exactly what you're saying. Everyone's always watching.
Yep. And so let's give a witness of joy and of love and, all these different pieces.
That's good.
And what that means internally is we need clarity. Like our SRLs and our regional leaders and area leaders, you are my greatest tool for knowing what people are needing to know on the ground.
Yes.
Let us know what's not clear, because then we can have clarity, which I hope brings us to a place of unity.
Yes.
That when the outside world looks in, makes an attractive witness for the kingdom. And I think that's my heart. I mean, I want clarity for our movement. I want to be able to speak to our diverse audiences. I want to see creatives I'm loving getting to know the creatives in our movement.
Yeah.
I want to know all the comms directors. I want to know all the people who are creatives, over time, because I love artists and I love communicators. But for me, the long game is, how are the people who are curious about faith, who are wondering about who Jesus is, who are wondering about what the Vineyard is, how can we give them the clearest picture of what that is? Because it is good. When we actually can show that, it is good.
It's really good. Well, let's ask God for that. And I have faith. So please pray for Nicole, anybody listening. And if you're a comms director and you've not reached to Nicole, you should reach to her.
Yeah.
And then be praying as you're in this sort of professional space. Be asking God, what does it look like for me to give the best of what I am to my local church?
That's right.
For the sake of the kingdom, on behalf of the people that I love and work with. And I have faith this is something God's going to give us wisdom in how to do. So thanks for making time, Nicole. I appreciate it. And see, I didn't even make fun of you. I was very restrained.
I'm really impressed.
Okay, good. Thank you. I needed a little affirmation. All right.
Thanks, Jay.
Peace.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at VineyardUSA. Thanks for listening. See you next week.